This is Bill Starbuck speaking. I'd like to begin by thanking Marcus Helgren, Darren Kent, and April Wright for putting together this workshop. I've decided to divide my comments into two parts. This first part will discuss some lessons I've learned from my research and colleagues over the years. The second part will offer some suggestions about how you could take advantage from extreme contexts. I was working in Berlin, Germany, and one of my colleagues was Bo Heerberry. Bo had gone back to Sweden for a visit, and he returned saying that he had received a grant from the Swedish government to investigate the problems in the shipbuilding industry. Shipbuilding had been a major industry for Sweden, but the shipbuilding industry was in great decline, and Sweden was worried what that meant for the Swedish shipbuilding companies. Boo was trying to find out what caused industries to decline and thus to cause shipbuilding to go into difficulty. He told me about this project, and I disagreed with what he was planning to do. I said, Boo, technologies are always changing, and people's tastes are always changing. And so industries are always going into decline, and new industries are always rising up. And the real question is, why does a company that's been successful in the shipbuilding industry remain in that industry as the industry begins to fall apart? Why doesn't that company migrate to a different industry? Boo said I was being unrealistic. The company that is a big investment in plant and equipment and the skills of people and expertise isn't able to move readily to another industry. And thus I was asking somebody who couldn't move I was asking the question of why somebody who couldn't move didn't move. Well, we had an argument, of course, and we decided that the solution for the argument was to collaborate. Boo and I would work together to investigate what we called crises. By crisis, we meant a situation that confronts a business firm with bankruptcy or another kind of organization with failure, going out of existence. I had a new job in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and so Boo decided that he would come to Milwaukee as a visiting professor for 1 year while we got our project going together. When we got to Milwaukee, we were joined by Paul Nystrom. Paul had been working in Milwaukee, and he became interested in what we were doing, and the three of us then began a collaboration that lasted for 10 years. We did a large number of case studies of companies that faced crises, and we tried to figure out what caused them to get into crises and how did they get out. Now, it turned out, of course, that crises are caused both by the phenomena that Boo had talked about and by the phenomena that I had talked about. But it was almost inevitable, I think, that if three people work together over a long period of time, that they're going to become good friends, and the results of their research is going to be a combination of their viewpoints rather than an either-or answer to their viewpoints. As a brief example of the kind of study we made, I'll mention our study of Fawcett, F-A-C-I-T. Fawcett was a mechanical calculator company based in Sweden. It was the best mechanical calculator manufacturer in the world. This is one of their mechanical calculators. It made an imposing image on someone's desk. It made a nice solid noise when it did calculations. You had confidence in what it was doing because it was such a sturdy, solid device. And Fawcett could make these things much cheaper than any other company, and their machines were quieter and faster than the machines of other companies. So they were in serious demand. But of course, this machine was liable to a problem. The problem was another little device that came along that challenged Fawcett's main product line. The little electronic calculators began to appear, and Fawcett's top managers were worried about this. They couldn't imagine initially that little plastic boxes would replace nice big solid machines. Well, it turned out, of course, that the issues that lead companies into serious problems are very complex problems, and our case studies tended to be complex studies. If you look for a single overall pattern, it is that companies try to learn to be efficient and to not make the same mistakes twice. And since they try to do that, they try to routinize their activities. They develop routines that they can rely on, routines that have been successful in the past, and they teach these routines to new personnel as they come in. They promote people who have specializations that match what the companies have been doing, and all these activities create blind spots. The companies become blind to new technologies that are coming up. They become more and more ignorant of what the customers that they're doing, their main customers are doing, and they gradually grow out of touch with their environment. When a crisis arises, when the companies become aware that they face these serious crises and they might go out of business, the power shifts to the top managers. The top managers don't rely on their lower personnel to get them out of trouble. They take control themselves, but the top managers are very often the people in the organization who are least aware of the new technologies, and they are the least aware of the needs and desires of their current customers. So what this shift in power does is it takes power back, the company back in time. It moves it from today to where it's somewhat obsolete into 10 or 15 years earlier when it was totally obsolete. Now I want to tell another story. And this is much more recent. I had a visiting appointment in the University of Canterbury in New Zealand, and I was assigned to co-teach a strategy course with Paul Knott. And Paul and I shared the lecturing in a large class, and he seemed to be a very quiet, shy, unassuming person. But during the course of the term, while we were there teaching this class, Paul was honored as one of the most outstanding mountain climbers in the world. This quite astonished me because I hadn't realized, I hadn't had any idea that my collaborator in this class was a famous man. But it seems that Paul had done a number of climbs that had been sponsored by the Royal Geographic Society and the Mount Everest Foundation, which are all both set up to sponsor difficult climbs of mountains that had never been climbed before. I asked Paul, where do you climb? I'm thinking probably he did some climbing in New Zealand. He said, well, I really like the mountains in Kyrgyzstan. I had never heard of Kyrgyzstan, but it turns out that Kyrgyzstan is a central part of Russia that is very mountainous. I said, well, Paul, have you ever climbed Mount Everest? He said, oh, Mount Everest is no challenge. They practically have escalators going up Mount Everest. So there's my second lesson. Things that look like challenges to many people don't look like challenges to the people who deal with them and who are best capable of understanding what they mean.